Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Oh gosh, that's a bit loud, isn't it? Heavens above. I was going to tell everybody to make certain that when you speak, please put your microphones on, but I've already done that, so please do so. As chair of this Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the South Hams District Council, can I welcome you all to this meeting? I look forward to working with you. For those of you who attended the working lunch, I appreciate you very much doing that, and I'm going to look at a councillor that didn't come to their lunch. Those lunches are going to be quite important in the future. And I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but but they're going to be really important because we're going to try and adopt some new policies for this group, and so that when the group actually sits, we actually have discussed the agenda beforehand, so that we know what we're going to discuss and what questions we're going to ask our executive members and our officers and those officers of different organisations which we're going to have, so that we really can get behind the nitty gritty and behind the gloss that sometimes we see. And I'm probably the oldest serving councillor here, which is now quite frightening. So I know what it's like we've got to get behind those issues so we can do our best for the residents of the South Hams. I see this group as a critical friend to the District Council and to our executive, and I hope very much that we will work closely with our executive over the next few years. Can I ask for apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies for absence from Councillor Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any councillors have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. Now, item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 16th of March in 2023. I believe from Amelia that these have actually already been accepted by the council earlier on. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. They were signed off at full council on the 25th of May.
Those have been signed. Item 4, urgent business. To my knowledge, there are no items of urgent business for this meeting. Correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And item 5, division of the agenda. Again, there's no reason for this agenda to be divided for this council meeting. Item 6, again, there's been no questions from the members of the public. So we go straight into now item 7, where Steve Molyneux will give us a presentation of our functions of our Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. So for those members who don't particularly know me, I'm the lead officer for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so I support the Chair and the Deputy Chair. I've got the ghosts of chairman's past sat in the corner there, and I'm sure that they may have views on what I say.
That's a perfect way of calling it. Yes, they are the ghosts.
And I just thought I'd give you my take, having been sort of the lead officer for the last couple of years on this committee. I just thought I'd give you my take on what your role is, and I have tried to think about the new administration and what their ambitions are and how this committee can work with the administration to really add value. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Amelia. So in terms of what is the role of the Scrutiny Committee, I think first and foremost we should be looking to drive improvement in public services and the services that we offer and the services that are provided to our residents. I think, as the chairman said earlier, it's about providing constructive, critical friend challenge to policy and decision makers, so that being in effect the executive. And I've certainly had the conversation with the leader about encouraging the executive for this to work both ways, so that the executive see you as an asset that they can use to help them in terms of policy decisions. I think it's about thinking about the public and our residents and making sure that the things that you pick up as members in your communities are the things that this committee should be looking at in terms of the bigger picture and deciding whether that's an item that is of public interest and needs to be investigated by the committee and scrutinised. And I think, you need to see yourselves. I think in the past, there's been lots of politics in terms of the structure of the committee, how it worked with executive. I think this is an opportunity to be independent from politics and think about that role of the residents, the services that you're looking at, the partners that you're examining. And I think for me, it's about, this is slightly different concept, but it's about ideas generation and being a bit of a think tank and looking at what else is going on in the country. And I think that's a real opportunity to say, do you know what? I've heard that this is happening. We've got the opportunity to debate that, and that might then come forward as something for the executive to consider. I think we should be much more proactive in terms of how we push stuff through to the executive. So that's my first slide. If we can move on, please. If anyone's got any questions, please ask, by the way. Apart from the two chairmen over there at the back, ex-chairman. So in terms of some of the sort of basic arrangements, so we've got 12 members, and I think we worked out how many existing members. I think it was you, wasn't it? Jonathan was the only member that had been on the committee before. So everybody's new, so appreciate that. So we need at least a minimum of 7 attendees for the meeting to actually be effectively legal. So if there was not 7 people, then we'd have to cancel the meeting. So it's important that you do try and attend. In terms of the agenda, we'll talk about it as the last item. It's the work programme, and the idea being that we have a work programme. We then agree it with the chair. That's presented back to and agreed by the committee, and that's our work programme for the year going forward. There's nothing to stop things being added, things being moved, and we should be also encouraging. There is a process for all members to put an item forward and say, I'd like Overview and Scrutiny to look at this because I've got residents that are asking for this and are not happy with that. So we need to encourage the wider membership to put things forward. And there's a process where they can complete a form, it comes through, it gets considered by the committee, and we say, you know what, that's a really good idea, we should be doing that. It doesn't have the committee doesn't have any actual decision making. You can make recommendations and suggestions through to executive or even to council, but you can't actually make a decision. You can't change something. You can just make a recommendation. The committee scrutinises the lead exec members, and in theory, I've put this in, not the lead officers. It should really be about holding the exec members to account, and the exec members are supported by officers. So depending on the level of questions, that's how it tends to work. The executive can ask you to scrutinise partners. They can ask you to deep dive into particular issues. They can ask you to research policy and provide advice on that. They can ask you to just consider an idea that they're thinking of and saying, do you think that's a great idea? And you can make that recommendation back. As I said earlier, I want to see us focus much more on being proactive about making recommendations. And I think you, again, as a choice as a reactive role, and I see this as being one of the things that I think we've got better at, and I think we need to get better at still, is scrutinising the external partners and really sort of holding them to account. And to that end, I also think in the past we've probably tried to be too ambitious in how many items we've covered on an agenda. And what's tended to happen is we've either hopelessly overrun, by which point people have lost interest, or we don't go into enough detail. And my recommendation to the committee would be to have less items on the agenda, but actually spend more time really going into the detail. And that's where the chairman said earlier about having that pre-meet over lunch beforehand. So if we're getting an external partner in, really having a clear view of what we're going to challenge them on, how we're going to organise ourselves in the meet, how you're going to organise yourselves in the meeting to make sure we get the best out of it and what we want to achieve. So that's where that pre-meet becomes really important as far as I'm concerned. And then the last point is there is the ability, when the executive make a decision, there is the ability, there's what's known as a call-in period. And if you, as the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, are a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, in fact, I think any member can go back to the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and request that an item is called in, and it can be called back to this committee to be scrutinised to say, is that the right decision they're making? Have they considered all the facts? So it's not used very often, and I would hope that it wouldn't need to be used very often going forward, but it is a power that you do have. Okay, if we want to move on to the next slide. Yes, sorry, Councillor Dennis.
Can I just ask, how long is that calling period?
10 days, I think. So items can be scrutinised in several ways. I think we've covered this now. On the committee agenda, a single item meeting, and what we've tended to do in the past is have like when it comes to budget setting, the committee would review the budget and make its recommendations to the executive before executive finally send the budget for council sign-off. Task and review groups, again, I think we've could do this better and do this more. We could certainly do it more in terms of research, and it was only at the end of last council that I think we actually got, in my mind, at the proper purpose of a task and finish group, which is about looking and researching about what other councils did, what other opportunities there were, and really getting into the detail of that. So I think, you know, I would be prepared to give up some additional time to potentially take part in task and finish groups. Now, they could be virtual. They don't have to be all face-to-face. You don't necessarily need to come here. And that last point about any member being can put forward an idea to the committee and say, I'd like the committee to scrutinise this. If we can move on. So when we're looking at what we should think about, I mean, this is pretty obvious. I'm not going to read all of this out really, but it's why do we want to scrutinise it? Why do we think that it's important? And as long as we can test ourselves that this is really important because it affects lots of people, it's having a detrimental impact on our residents or households or so on. We don't just want to create work for the sake of it just because we fancy knowing about something. It's about what's the reason for doing it. So I think that's really important for me. And I think, have I got anything else? I think that was it for me, I think. Yeah. So has anyone got any questions?
Can I just say, Steve, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. This is your committee, councillors, and it's the council's committee that if any councillor feels that there is something that we should be looking into, please let me or Ben know or Amelia know, because that's what we're here for. We're here to be the critical friend of the council. We're here to work with the council. We're obviously all politically minded to a certain extent, but we must work together for the benefit of our residents. That is why we're councillors. We're not councillors because of a political flag. We're councillors because we care passionately about our communities and our parishes and our towns and our residents, and that's why we're all here. Can I thank Councillor Thomas and Councillor Birch for joining us this afternoon, which I appreciate. You said they look like ghosts. I think they look like the two characters out of the Muppets on the balcony. But before we bring Dan or John in, can I just ask Amelia, is there anything else that you want to add? Because we are very, very lucky to have Amelia as our clerk for the committee. She's very, very knowledgeable and very experienced. And I just want to ask her to...
Just quickly say, you'll get the agenda a week before the meeting. So do have a look through the agenda. So there's nothing you understand, do speak to either myself or the chair or to Steve. But you can also speak to the report author for further clarification. Also, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Don't be afraid to ask the question. If you don't understand something, just ask.
That's just as well with me. So, right, gentlemen from the Muppets. Councillor Thomas, would you like to come in first? Was it Waldorf in the Muppets? I'm not certain. Would you like to just give your worldly knowledge? on what we have been doing in the past and what we should be doing in the future?
Well, I thought you dealt with it very well, to be fair. I mean, I think the most important thing really for this committee is to consider the fact that there shouldn't really be anything that isn't, off the agenda, potentially. I think it's very important. We weren't always blessed as a previous committee with the luxury of having the opportunity to discuss everything we wanted to, and sometimes things did get political. I know we're talking about a clean slate. I mean, it would be very easy of me to sit here and say, I think that should remain the same. And I think members of my group should absolutely vote against talking about things that I might personally find awkward coming to ONS, but that would actually be hypocritical. And if I genuinely believe in the purpose of ONS, then it has to follow that you shouldn't be frightened to pull anything onto the table that's relevant to the good of the citizens of the South Hams. And in that, I would hope that the exec will support you wholeheartedly, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Birch, have you got a few words of wisdom for us?
Well, there's no point. I mean, I've had the luxury of talking to the committee prior to this meeting, so I would only really repeat what I said a short while ago. It's just interesting for members to compare my presentation to that of Mr. Molyneux. I mean, there were one or two slight differences, but there we are. I think, generally speaking, as I mentioned in the pre-meeting, I think the benefit for us as a council is that we seek to work together for the benefit of our residents, rather than seek to score any political points, and I would welcome that. So, as they say, welcome on board.
Thank you, John. Do any members have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Turn my microphone off. So we should go straight into item 8. So we're lucky to have Councillor Hopwood with us, Councillor Thomas with us, and Neil Hawke with us. The floor is yours, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this report. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to recommendation 2, which is the provision of more regular updates on KPIs. For those who weren't in the previous administration, they were only done 6 monthly, and they were always too far behind to be very meaningful. One thing about losing an election is that when you don't expect to lose it, you leave everything in a really good state. So what the new administration does have is a really, really good council to take over. And this is one of the things that I was working on before the election. I wish I hadn't bothered now, but I think it'll be better moving forward. We need these KPIs, all joking aside, are going to be much better now. They're going to be more relevant, and they're going to be every 3 months. So I just wanted to say that. Going into the key performance service report itself, if you scroll down to page 17, performance on a page, if you're all there, you'll see an awful lot of green smiley faces. That, again, I believe is through the hard work of the previous administration. I can only say it this once, so I'm going to say it as many times as I can in this meeting. There are a few red faces, and that's a shame, but there are reasons behind them. But all in all, our performance within these KPIs is excellent. This shows every KPI on one page. Now, I can do this one of 2 ways, Chairman, because I don't know what you want to do because you're a new committee. I can either go through each KPI individually and see if there are any questions on it, or you can just look at this page and take questions off this page. I'm quite happy to do it, either go through page by page or just an overall.
As this is our first meeting, perhaps go through page by page. Councillor Hopwood, please.
No problem, thank you. So the first KPI is freedom of information requests handled within the time scale. and you'll see that's a red face. So obviously a red mark, we're below target. The target of 90% is set by the ICO, so it is a target set in stone, and we're not reaching it. I think the most important thing to remember with the Freedom of Information Act requests is those that are received by our residents, who are the most important people within the South Hams, and our small businesses within the South Hams, they will always be answered within the target period. The ones that won't be answered within the target period, if we don't have the resource to do it, will be FOI requests from maybe journalists or national businesses wanting to delve into something. And I believe that part is why the performance isn't hitting target. But I can assure you that residents and small businesses within the South Hams, their Freedom of Information Act requests do get dealt with within the ICO time period. I don't know if there are any questions on that target or on that KPI.
What sort of requests are there? Are there examples, or what sort of things come up as information requests?
I would think a lot are planning, to be fair, to delve into maybe I didn't receive planning permission, but can I have information? They could be to do with anything from wanting to know something within the council that actually they're not entitled to know, or it's not public knowledge, or within the council that they just couldn't find the information on. Neil, do you have any more specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So we get quite a few about IT contracts, and when sort of IT contracts are coming up, those sorts of things. It really is a really broad range because of the nature of FOI. They can request pretty much whatever they like. To the point, one that stands to memory is how much the council spends on exorcisms. Was a question we had that we responded to, but so there really is a broad spectrum of questions. I mean, that was a genuine request that we had. It came in around the 31st of October, but
can I ask how much do we do spend on them?
It was 0 at that point in time. I couldn't give you the updated position. But yeah, so it really is a broad range about all of our service areas. I mean, you'll note here that Revs and Bens is an area where we've had a number of requests, and a lot of those continue to be around, I think, but business grants that were issued during COVID is a frequent one that we've had recently, and certainly since COVID. So really is a broad range, covering a whole host of topics.
Okay, Councillor Cooper.
Quick question. Has there ever been any sanction or risk of sanction from the ICO for missing targets or deadlines?
Councillor Hawke, Mr. Hawke.
Councillor Hawke, promotion, I love it. There hasn't, no. We've not had any sanctions from the ICO. The threshold is very, very high for them to implement sanctions on the council. I mean, if we did see an increase in number of people going to the ICO to complain about our performance, then yeah, absolutely, we might come on their radar, but we haven't so far.
Mr. Molyneux?
I was just going to go back to the exorcism one. And of course, as a council, we don't perform exorcisms, we have elections.
Councillor Dennis?
Does this figure include subject access requests? So when residents ask for their data, is that part of this figure?
It doesn't include subject access requests, no, those are handled separately.
Any other questions?
Can I, just picking up on what Councillor Cooper said. So if somebody's not happy with our response or thinks that we've not responded, and we do say, we are within our rights to say that information is not valid, they can then appeal to the ICO, and you'll see on there that we've had 2 complaints, of which one was not investigated and the other wasn't upheld. So you can, if somebody feels that they are aggrieved because we've not provided the information that they were asking, they have a means of complaining, and we get investigated that way.
Councillor Duentia, sorry.
Who sets the KPIs?
The ICO, Independent Commissioner Office.
And could we set others, or if we felt that we needed to look at certain areas in more detail? As we go through the KPIs, there are different targets set for each KPI. Some are national targets, and some we've set our own targets. So as we go through the report, it'll become apparent.
Mr. Molyneux, did you
No, I was
want
going
to come
to say,
back?
jump
Oh,
back,
okay.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. No, okay. Councillor Hopwood would like to continue, please.
Thank you, Chair. The next one is Ombudsman cases investigated and upheld. Not a lot to say about that. It's 0. So it's obviously lower than the targets. The target's 51%, and we're at 0. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions on that.
No, doesn't look like it. Thank you.
The next one is the percentage of major applications determined within 13 weeks or with an agreed extension of time. This, Councillor De Wenter, is a national target of 60%. We actually set our own target of 70% because we didn't feel 60 was high enough, and we're above our target. We're actually determining major applications at 82%. So that's higher. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions on that? No? Okay, Councillor. Oh, Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, what constitutes a major application as opposed to a non-major?
A major application is over a certain amount of houses, which is it 50 something?
10, I think.
Is it over 10?
Yeah, I think it's 10.
10.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Woolwell at 2,000 houses is a major application.
Okay, Councillor Hopwood, can you continue, please?
Thank you, Chair. Percentage of non-major applications determined within 8 weeks or with an agreed extension of time. Again, there's a national target of 70. We, as a council, set this target at 80, and we're achieving 92%. Don't know if there are any questions on that one, Chair.
It's not a deep question. I'm being a rookie on this. Non-major applications. I understand now it's housing, but should I know if I was like, public, that's housing when that's published? Should I know that? Planning, to do with planning. Shouldn't it have like planning or housing or something if I was looking at that? It's a silly thing.
I would agree.
I didn't know what it meant.
I would agree. It should say percentage of non-major planning applications.
Yeah.
That's what it should say.
Yeah, okay.
We can amend that. Can I just answer the question that Councillor Cooper asked earlier in terms of what happens if we miss those targets nationally? Because there is an implication for this. So if we miss the national figures, so the 60% for majors and the 70% for non-major applications, then the planning inspectorate could review us, and there's all sorts of sanctions that they could put in place, including taking away our ability to determine our own applications. So it's a really critical target for us to make sure that we maintain. And the way they calculate it, the reason we have a higher target is because the way they calculate it is slightly different in terms of timeframes. So we are constantly aware of whether we are in excess of that target, because the implications can be significant for us.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, I just want to come in very quickly on this, not on these KPIs specifically, but on just for the benefit of members. Agreed extensions of time is an interesting one, because one of the things that I'm talking about with senior planning officers is how that looks, because there should be a differential, I would argue, to members on who asks for the extension. So if the applicant asks for the extension, I think that should go into one pile, and if the district asks for the extension, that should go into a different pile, because I think otherwise there's a potential danger that it looks as like we're always quick off the mark, when sometimes, in fairness, we haven't been. And I think we need to probably, but that is more for me with my planning portfolio hat on, to look at how we work that with senior officers, and that will then feed through.
That makes perfect sense. Councillor Hopwood?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I wasn't actually going to mention the extension of times, but seeing you've brought it up now,
So what I've spoken to Mr. Wagstaff about is actually keeping the when someone has an agreed extension of time, they're asked to put up, and they may be asked to put a planning application in, which is most of the times. It then comes off this target, and it's only when if it didn't get accepted by the planning committee, then it would go back on. Well, in my view, it should stay on until the end, so the case is resolved, full stop. And I think that's what they're looking to do. So an application, if it's got an agreed extension of time, also will not come off those figures until it's gone right through the planning process, or in whatever process it's going through to help it, it'll stay on there to the end, because I think that's a more realistic target. And for, as Councillor Penfold, for the word planning, I think probably in all these, that's an oversight, Mr. Hawke, that we need to put in. It should say planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Any questions, councillors? No. Oh, Councillor Steele.
Thank you. So it looks like the planning office is doing a good job. Does that mean there's enough staff in the planning office, or resources? Is the planning office happy with their level of resources?
Councillor Hopwood, to reply.
So I think it's only doing a good job because it's got an agreed extension of time for applications, and there is going to be a review of the whole planning department that's being done, that will come forward to exec in September, and at that point you'll get a really good overview of the whole planning commission, or the whole planning process.
Councillor Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you. Just to put more detail around what Councillor Hopwood said there. So there's a planning improvement plan, and that is reported to the executive. And as Councillor Hopwood said, it's down on the agenda for the September executive to give an update. Part of that is new software that's being put in at the moment. So that, and in terms of have we got enough resources? Planners in general is a resource that is really difficult. It's a highly skilled role. Every council in the country is after effectively two things. One is social workers if you're an upper tier authority, and the other one is planners if you're a lower tier authority. So they're a highly sought after resource. You are competing against private industry as well in terms of planners becoming planning agents, and it's a constant battle. We have planners come in and planners go in pretty much all the time.
Thank you. Enforcement cases. This one I was slightly surprised at, but Councillor Hopwood.
I was with you on that one, so was I. I can't say anything else about it. So there's no national benchmark for this one, but we're doing really well because our target is 400 and we've got 390 open enforcement cases, and I have to say I was surprised as well.
Councillor Cooper said, is that just in the Dartmouth and East Dart ward? Mr. Molyneux.
So I've just been in a meeting with Councillor Thomas, the leader and the chief executive, and we talked about the fact that the enforcement KPI doesn't really mean a lot, and actually that we need to revisit that. And we did say we would be looking at that, because actually, if you wanted to be really cruel, you could say, well, actually, in the quarter, we closed 5 more cases than were open. So if you extrapolated that at 5 cases per quarter, it would take us, I don't know how many years, to get down to a decent level. The challenge with enforcement cases in particular is, in some cases, enforcement action is you can regularize the development with a normal planning application. And what happens then is the enforcement case stays open, waiting for the planning application to come in. And that process might take 12 months, it might take 18 months. But in the meantime, you've already made a decision that says a planning enforcement case can be solved by a normal planning application, which is likely to get approval, but it's still classed as an open planning enforcement case. So it sort of masks some of it, and then of course a lot of planning. There's also, you know, what are just neighbour disputes as well. So what I would encourage all members is, when the enforcement cases come out, is make sure that if you don't understand why there's been no progress, is you contact the enforcement team and try and push for answers.
Thank you for that. Councillor Thomas?
Chairman, I've made it very clear to you that enforcement is being revisited by officers, and that as soon as there is a working document that's been through executive, it will come to your committee for members to scrutinise in full.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just ask on this one, could we not also put there the outstanding cases, which, I mean, most of our parishes and towns are really concerned about the enforcement and the lack of enforcement. Just say 390 out of a target of 400 doesn't really say anything, does it? Or am I being really critical? Councillor Birch?
Yeah, I mean, enforcement has troubled this council for quite a few years now, and I think what it's been put down to, in the main, is the lack of resources. What this, in looking at this document here, you need to read the small print at the bottom, which says basically there are 400 open cases, and the position is that there's been 400 open cases been reported, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe more. So I think the problem is that we have got this backlog of 400 cases which clearly need addressing, and which clearly is being addressed. So you know, I agree with you, Councillor Hawkins. It really doesn't give the full picture, but there is a problem. It's been identified, and hopefully it'll come up with a solution.
That's really good news. Thank you. Councillor Hopwood, do you want to continue temporary accommodation?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a target. It says for trend purposes only. So, and it's on sort of an even keel. I don't know if anybody has any questions on this one.
Any questions? No. Councillor Hopwood, can you continue then?
Percentage of cases where homelessness was prevented. Again, the target's 60%, and we're at 63%. So we're clearly above target, which is good news. 83 applications were taken, resulting in 52 successful applications. And I was just wondering myself, what did happen to the other 31? I was meant to get that answer this morning and I completely forgot. So that might be something that Mr. Hawke answered.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. So yes, the remainder, essentially, these are cases. So 63% of people that presented as homeless. There's then an assessment of, are they intentionally homeless, and if they're intentionally homeless, those figures come out of the mix. So these are 63% of people that presented as homeless were. Homelessness was prevented, so maybe we worked with their landlord to overcome an issue or those sorts of issues. The remainder would then move, and I think we need more information on this update, to be honest, moving forward. But the remainder may well have moved into our main council housing duty, so they may well have been put into emergency accommodation at that point in time. I don't know, Steve, if you've got any more information on that one. But I don't know if we've got anybody from housing on this call.
I was just going to congratulate Councillor Hopwood, because that's exactly when we reviewed these as an officer team ahead of this meeting. I said the question that's going to get asked is what happens to the difference, and thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
You mentioned intentionally homeless. I know what that means, but could you just explain what that means?
It's not my expertise, I'll be honest, in terms of housing.
And it isn't mine, but I'll give it a go. So that is somebody that has decided to leave a property and then said, I've got nowhere to live. Well, actually, you're the one that's decided to leave. It might be someone, I think, who's even trashed a property and then been evicted by their landlord, but it's their fault. We also have cases of people just turning up from the other end of the country, going, well, I want to live here, and we have to investigate how they've ended up down here. And in a number of cases, it's purely because they've just given up a notice on their existing tenancy somewhere else. So there's quite a bit of that.
Thank you, Steve. The one thing I do know is that we've got a really good homeless team in Southampton Council. So for the new councillors, if you need any help or helping with, just get in touch with them because they're very helpful. Councillor Eadie?
Yeah, how many cases of homelessness do we have in the Southampton?
There were 83 applications made in this quarter for homelessness, and 52, it says in the report, resulted in a successful outcome. The only other thing I would add to that is, of course, some people choose to be homeless. So there is also an element of people who choose to be homeless, and that is the lifestyle they want to lead. They'll be there in the mix as well.
Councillor Molyneux?
No.
Mr. Molyneux?
So in terms of what you've got is effectively rough sleeper, and we do a rough sleeper count of those are the people who have chosen, I don't want to live in a house. And I think at the last count, I think it was 2 in the Southamptons. It's an annual figure that's done. So it varies and fluctuates throughout the year, but they pick a particular point in the year when they do that count. And it was very, very low. It's normally averaged in previous years, it's normally in single figures in that sense. In terms of those preventing homeless, some of these people will have not actually been evicted when they come to us, and of course we will then, if they do get evicted, we will make sure that they've got accommodation then to move into. So we help people from the moment they get an eviction notice, which is how we try and work, rather than somebody saying, I've been kicked out and I'm here with my bags, sort of thing. So we try and do the work at the point of eviction notice to stop actually people being on the streets at all. But we do have that rough sleeper, persistent rough sleeper issue, which, like I say, was I think 2 or 3, but can drift up to 8 or 9 during the year.
Councillor Dennis?
So it's my understanding from Mr. Hall, that this figure of 83 doesn't include intentionally homeless. So there are still people unaccounted for here. Clearly, some of the most vulnerable in our communities, and I don't really like the fact that 63% is green and they've got a smiley face against it. So clear. I mean, I think looking at the graph, we have achieved 70% in the past. Could we consider, or I don't think we make the decision, but could we ask that target is pushed up a bit?
Councillor Birch?
Yeah, I think this the report in the note at the bottom actually hits the nail on the head when it says lack of affordable private rented remains a significant issue. I mean, as far and that is creating a problem of which we as a council are now addressing. But as far as the saying that there have been successful outcomes, is the successful outcome putting a person who is effectively becoming homeless, putting them in temporary accommodation in Torbay? Because in my opinion, that is not a successful outcome. That's my word. In other words, are these figures locating the homeless in temporary accommodation in hotels or bed and breakfasts in Torbay, is that a successful outcome? Because in my book, it's not a successful outcome. I mean, what worries me, I mean, we have got a wonderful housing team who address these issues, but the problem is they have a dreadful problem trying to find accommodation for those who are threatened with eviction. I mean, I'm dealing with a case at the moment which is just highlights the problem. I won't go into detail, but the only what's on offer is accommodation in Torbay, and I don't think that's successful. So I think it'd be helpful to expand on what is, a successful outcome. I don't know whether we're in a position to be given some more information on what is a successful outcome.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Councillor Birch, because I've had a number in our patch that have had to be housed in either Torbay or in Plymouth, and which is nowhere near their homes and where they wish to be. Councillor Thomas?
Can I suggest, Chairman, you've just given yourself your first item for the agenda on the next point.
Thank you.
That's exactly
Steve?
what I was going to say.
Okay.
I was going to say exactly the same thing when we come to reviewing what we want on the work programme. It's an in-depth look at homelessness, because the point I was going to make, and it links on what Councillor Birch said, in terms about the lack of housing, is if you go to the previous KPI, which was about the cost of temporary accommodation, the two are intrinsically linked. So if we are paying for hotel accommodation, then that is pushing our cost up, and that's because we don't have the availability of housing. So I think there's if you start looking at what does that measure mean and going into the detail of that, you then almost move on to the cost of temporary accommodation, and then of course to the bigger picture of the availability of affordable housing.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Hopwood?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea for this committee to have a really good look into the prevention of homelessness and the use of temporary accommodation, and that is something that I don't believe has been done for a long time. So I think we'd all welcome some good work on that.
Everybody happy with putting that onto our workload? Yep. Thank you very much. Councillor Hopwood, employment estates.
Thank you. Again, there's no national average. We set our target at 90% occupancy rates, and we're actually at 95%. I don't really think there's a lot I can say about that one. I don't know if there's any questions on it.
Councillor Penfold?
Does the estate include Follerton House?
Mr. Molyneux? Well, I said last night, no, it doesn't. It does include Follerton House.
I believe it does, because there is rental abilities. We have tenants in this.
There you go.
In here.
Thank you very much. It only goes to prove that we really do need some more employment estates in the South Hams as well, because we haven't done a lot of investment in those in the past, so hopefully that will come forward. Temporary events notices. Do I have to declare an interest being a regatta committee member?
No, and I think we'll skip right over that because it's 100% and 100%, so I don't think there will be... Are there any questions on that one? No.
Okay.
So the next one, Chairman, is average number of days to process new housing benefit claims. Again, the target is 17 days and to process a new claim. We are achieving that in 12.9 days, but I'd like you to note June that it came down to 8.1 days. So it all depends on the time of year, and the applications you get at that time is all relevant to how quickly they're being processed. And I do believe that this figure will come down significantly when the Revs and Bends section has finished its review, which will be before the end of the year. So I don't know if there's any questions on that one. Well, no, actually, the view. In all fair, Chairman, can I please defend myself and say the Conservative administration put the review in place before the new administration will get the benefits. Thank you.
Councillor Birch, do you really have to wind her up?
I can't see him either. It's awful sat here.
Councillor Birch won't be invited to this meeting if he carries on winding up Councillor Hopwood. Councillor Dennis.
Sorry, it's going back to the previous one about temporary event notices, and it's just a technicality which someone in the room may or may not be able to answer. But is there actually a statutory requirement to be issued in 1 working day, or is it, because I read it was a statutory requirement to be receipted within 1 day of receiving the tenant's notice? So I'm just a bit confused. I'm just concerned that we're prioritising these, we're dropping everything else, and actually we perhaps don't need to be processing them quite so quickly. And then my second question is, you know, if we're doing so well at this, does this need to remain as a KPI that we're sort of measuring? I'm just wondering why we're prioritising this as a KPI as opposed to how quickly, I don't know, taxi license applications are processed or other types of licenses are processed. A few questions there.
So I will defend Councillor Hopwood's honour here and tell Councillor Dennis that the reason it's 100% and it's so good is because of the IT software that we've put in. So effectively, we've turned it from a manual process that needed people to examine it, look at it, and then issue a yes, your approval to it is now automated, and the only human check-in is actually reviewing the approval. So it's almost just a checklist to quality check that it's right. So it's actually one of the successes of the IT team in terms of automating this. So it's a critical thing because we get a lot of these, you know, for stuff in the summer particularly. And we've managed to take a lot of human intervention out of this and actually improve the service. So it's a real success story. But actually, is it statutory go? Do we need to measure this, and is it an important one for the committee? Well, that's up to you guys, really.
Committee, what do you think? Councillor Penfold?
I think you pat yourself on the back and move on.
But
I'd agree, yes, it seems like a job done. And
yeah.
if it's going to stay at that level because it's automated, then yeah, we can live with it.
Okay. That obviously was the previous administration.
Absolutely, Chairman. That's why this is such a good report.
Councillor Thomas.
Chairman, the reason it needs to be on there in all seriousness is because you will note from the performance history that when it isn't 100%, you need to know about it. Because actually the reality is if somebody applies for a TENS and they live next door to you and we don't do what we're supposed to do and they get tacit approval because we haven't done what we're going to do and you're up till 4 o'clock in the morning because they've got a TENS that's been granted through an administrative error, you're not going to be very happy about it. So I think it's important this committee sees that it remains at 100% because if it doesn't, you need to know about it.
And it only takes this committee 10 minutes every 12 months to have a look at it. So yes, let's leave it there. Councillor Dennis.
But this KPI isn't measuring if they've been done correctly necessarily, is it? It's just measuring that we've done them very quickly. So, you know, you could issue it and it's still not satisfy the neighbour.
That comes down, Chairman, to whether you have faith in the officers of our licensing department or not.
Shall we move on? Councillor Hopwood would like to continue, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Average number of days to process change in circumstances to housing benefits. Again, the target is 6 days and we're doing them in 4.33 days. So I think what you've got to remember is that these people, whether they're applying for a new, it's a new housing benefit claim or it's just a change, they are applying because they need the money. And their circumstances are so that they need to be assessed and sorted quickly. So the lower that is, the more benefit is to our resident. I'd like to see them both that and the previous target come down even days come down even further. So it might be one that maybe we reflect on in the next quarter to see if it's improved. And I think with the new revs and bends system and the review, it should come down more. Thank you. The next target is council tax collection. And again, it's on target for the end of the year. This authority has one of the best council tax collection rates for percentages in this country for collecting council tax. I think we were at about, I think last year about 92% for council tax collection, and bearing in mind we're the collection authority for several other authorities, then and the police and the other ones, fire. Sorry. I think we do really well because they rely on us to collect this money. I personally think that doesn't become a meaningful target until the end of the year, when the 12 months is over. It's only at that point we can see whether we can judge whether that's hit target or not. I don't believe, in May, in April, for instance, we only hit 10% of our collection, whereas in June we hit nearly 30%. I just don't. I think it's meaningless until the end of the year, personally.
Any questions? No.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
It was just a point in terms of I recently, literally this week, got the outturn figures and compared to the rest of the country, and we compared our council tax rate was the 22nd highest in the country in terms of percentage. So that gives you an indication as to how well we're doing in terms of council tax collection.
Councillor Hopwood.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think our council tax collection rate is not only a credit to this authority, but it's a credit to our residents as well, because they're the ones who are paying on time, and they're the ones that we really need to focus on. So I think we've always done very well and will continue to do well, but I think that's thank you to our residents for helping us to achieve that target.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Could you continue? Please.
Number of missed bins per 100,000. So the target is 80 per 100,000, and this quarter we did 71.3 per 100,000. It's definitely, I mean, it's going down. Definitely going, and I think again that it will continue to improve, because now we are back with the new waste collection and we've brought it back in house. Those targets have come down massively, and it's again, and we say this at every opportunity, that is a credit to the waste collection team and the work they've done under the old administration to get the targets down.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Can I just say to Mr. Molyneux and his team, thank you very much for all the hard work and effort you put in over the last 2 years, 3 years, was it in the end? But certainly in the last 6 months to actually achieve this. It's been really good, and that's the council working together to actually achieve that, councillors and officers. So thank you very much for that. Household recycling rates.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is just. It's a bit of an insignificant number at the moment, because in September we are going on to the Devon Line service, and I think it's after that service is bedded in and the residents who are not on that service get used to it, that this will be a meaningful target. At the moment, I don't think it's meaningful, because so many of our residents aren't on the new recycling service. So let's wait until December time, and then hopefully we'll start to see an improvement. Well, we will see an improvement in that 47.46%.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I put in my 3 monthly request to Mr. Molyneux to amend the board in the entrance to Fullerton that states we do 60% recycling, which clearly is not correct. So perhaps another gentle reminder, Mr. Molyneux, to amend the board at the entrance to Fullerton.
Could I also ask before that? Could I just ask that we could, as committee members, could we actually see how we compare with the other district councils in Devon? Could that be sent out to us on a separate email, please, so that this is important. We've got to achieve better than this, and we've got to work together to achieve that. Steve, you wanted to speak?
I'd just like to say, sorry, Chairman, before Mr. Molyneux comes in, that I still think those figures you get will be pretty meaningless until we're on the new Devon Line service. Sorry.
It just gives us a benchmark, doesn't it, to start from?
So the only thing I was going to add, Chair, is that DLUC, central government, have brought in a new department called Offlog, which is the Office of local government, and the idea of that is that it's going to effectively performance manage local government, and this is one of the key targets, and it's one of the first areas that they've asked the new department to look at. So I agree with everything that the chairman said there about, and Councillor Hotwood said about the rates being, at the minute, they're not reflective of where we need to be or want to be, but this will be a key target that central government will be measuring us on in the coming 12 months. So it'd be really important to monitor.
And I think that's a good thing, because we need to be better than what we are at the present moment. Any? Can I ask a question? You can. Chairman. He's got a loud enough voice.
Right. Back in March, April time, we organised for us 10 dozen new recycle lorries to come into force in September. Can you give us an update on how that is now coming along, please?
So the plan is still that we will be rolling the new service out with the new trucks from October. So it's still on track. We've placed the order. Mrs. Moody has actually just got back from Ireland, visiting the manufacturers to see the state of manufacture of the trucks. There's still a lot of infrastructure work to do in terms of our depots to make sure that we're ready in time. But we are still, as of today, still planning on a rollout in October of the new service. And there'll be more member briefings about that as we get into September.
Excellent news. Okay, that's really good. Thank you. Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chair. Next one is contact centre calls answered within 5 minutes. We gave a target of 60 to 80%, and we're actually at 76% of calls being answered within 5 minutes in this quarter. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
The target of 60 to 80%, can't that just be changed? It's quite a large kind of target.
Well, as a ONS group, that's what you can. You have the power to suggest that.
So, Councillor Cooper, do you want to recommend a figure?
100%. Well, if 80 is your top target, make it 80.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I welcome that. I think stretching targets are a good idea.
Councillor Dennis.
Apologies. I just wondered if it might be possible to have some more detail on this. It's a bit more of a breakdown, because I know myself, before I was elected to council, I got through to the switchboard very quickly, but then when you get transferred to a department, seems to be a different process, and sometimes you can be left waiting for quite a long time. So I don't understand what is being measured here, and clearly if our residents are having to wait longer than half an hour, 45 minutes to actually speak to who they need, the department they need to speak to, then that's not satisfactory. So is there a way we can see how many people had to wait? I don't know. I just don't think there's enough detail on that particular KPI.
Hopwood.
I'm really glad you've asked this question, because it took me several attempts to get the information I could understand out of Mr. Davies this morning. So I'm glad I can use that information. So I thought maybe this would be a question that came up. So I've looked into it. So I'll give you May, their figures. So in May, 4,000 or 65% of calls were answered within 5 minutes. Between 5 and 10 minutes, 15.9% of calls were answered within that period. And from 10 to 15 minutes, 9%. 20 to 30 minutes, 4%. No one waited more than 30 minutes, and nor should they. I have to just say that. I really don't think they should. So calls answered over 15 minutes in May,
were 600 calls in total out of 7,500 calls. So out of 7,500 calls, 600 calls in May had to wait longer than 15 minutes. What you've got to remember is you've got to have a balance between answering all calls within 5 minutes. What is the cost of that to the cost of answering all calls within a reasonable time, bar a few? And I think there's you could put as many people as you wanted into that contact centre, and there are still going to be times when you're going to get such a high demand that you're not going to get all the calls answered unless you resource it so highly, which just isn't affordable to this council, Chairman. So there has to be a balance between affordability and the answering of calls. My personal view is, and it's one that I've held for many years, is that I believe that all calls should be answered within 15 minutes, with the higher percentage being answered within 5 minutes. And as long as the 15 minutes plus is low, then I think that's acceptable. But the 65 in June, 68% of calls were answered within 5 minutes. So the bulk of our calls are answered within 5 minutes, and the time only starts from when you're put through to the department. So if you go onto the switchboard, if you don't choose an option, so if you don't press, I don't know what one for waste, it's answered when you've pressed that number one. If you go through the switchboard, it's measured from when you start to queue for the department. I think the stats could be better, but I think they're good. The amount of calls abandoned. So I was looking at an abandoned calls chart earlier, and it's because what we don't know and what we've never been able to measure, and I don't believe we ever will, because you can't ask the person because they're not on the phone anymore, is within the first couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, you are listening to a message that tells you what you can do online, and encouraging people to go online. Now, whilst I realise that there are residents that don't want to use online service and they still want to speak to someone, we're finding that all the abandoned calls, most of them are abandoned within the first 1 to 3 minutes. And that says to me that actually they're listening to the message that we're giving out and they're going online. Some may not, some may be thinking, oh, damn that, I'm not waiting, and put the phone down immediately. But my gut instinct is that people are moving, the channel shift is happening, and people are going more and more to using our online services. But as a council, we need to recognise that residents have to have a choice of how they contact us, and they have to have a choice of by phone, online. We will never take their choice away, but we would encourage those who can to use our online services. And from September this year, late September, we are launching a new South Hams website. So the website will be smarter and crisper and easier to use. So again, those people who may have found it difficult to navigate it in the past, hopefully they'll find it easier in the future. But if they don't, they can still phone us.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Penfold.
I appreciate that. I think that's a really positive move forward, the new website. But I'm really concerned about a resident who really doesn't feel very comfortable with using the website, waits for 30 minutes and then gets fed up and calls. Is there a system in place or something where there's a callback, or they can leave a message, or
we have a system where we can offer a callback service to some residents. But when you look at the stats, in May, no one waited longer than 30 minutes, and between 20 and 30 minutes, 4% of the total course of the month only waited 20 to 30 minutes. So the stats are, it's really low, the bottom end, and so it should be, because we shouldn't have people waiting that low. In June, 3% waited between 20 and 30 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, 4%. So they are really low in terms of call volume. I accept that I would like to see them at nothing, at nil. But there are always going to be times if a resident phones up on a Monday morning, I can guarantee that they're going to be waiting longer on the phone than on a Wednesday afternoon, or definitely a Friday afternoon. That's, you know, but yeah, I accept. I absolutely agree with you that residents shouldn't be waiting that long, but to man the systems so that doesn't happen would just be unaffordable. But yeah, there is a callback system.
Can we thank you for that? Of course, they could have also phoned the wrong council to actually decide in 1 to 3 minutes that they actually needed Devon County. So that could be part of it, couldn't it? Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hopwood, do you want to finish off, please?
We've got 2 to go, so I'll do them both together. So we've got Rev and Ben's calls answered in 8 minutes, and that's not acceptable, that 59%. But Revs and Bens is going on its own from September. So Revs and Bens from September is splitting from the, I think it's the best way of describing it, is splitting from the contact centre and answering their own calls. So I'm hoping that that will go up. But of course, Revs and Bens, some calls can take half an hour to an hour. So I think it's always going to be not a, you know, hopefully it'll get better than that, but I don't think it's ever going to get. Mr. Mon.
So the principle here is because the calls tend to be complex, they take longer to resolve. Now, the idea at the moment is so it takes quite a lot of time and effort to train contact centre staff to give them the knowledge to be able to deal with every inquiry. So what we've decided to do is to put the people who have all that knowledge, the people who process revenues and benefits, to deal with the calls, and we've given them some of the resource out of the contact centre and are training that resource up. But the idea being is those calls can then be dealt with quicker because the people who are actually on the end of the phone actually can do the processing at the time. So hopefully we should reduce the waiting time because actually the work will get done quicker and at the point, and that's the plan. And then calls will then only overflow if those Revs and Bens staff are all on the phone. And there are, Revs and Bens is a classic example of where there are peaks in demand. So, for example, we've just issued the summonses for the people who've not paid their council tax this year. So on Monday, we had a massive increase in call volumes because people had got a letter saying, if you don't pay, we're going to take you to court. So people then contact us to say, I can't pay, make a payment arrangement. All those calls take longer. And at the same time, everybody who's got one of those letters is contacting us to try and talk about the issue that they've got. So we can never scale up to the peak demand. It's just impossible. But we're doing what we can to try and smooth the flow and try and reduce the call waiting time.
Thank you for that, Steve. Councillor Cooper?
I think Councillor Hopwood touched on it. It's not just about how quickly the calls are answered, but it's the quality of the calls and kind of the quality of the kind of solution you get. So I think it's very important. We know that.
So we have quality monitoring software, so all the calls are recorded and the team leaders in the contact centre listen to a random selection of calls to make sure that calls are being dealt with properly.
Councillor Cooper?
Could that possibly be a KPI then, which we see that somebody calls and they get the solution they need? Was that too complex?
We can take it away and try and work out what that might look like and bring back something for the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Councillors, any other questions? No. Okay, Councillor. We're nearly there.
should know better. Sorry, that is total calls, and you might want to say, why have we got a KPI to know the total of calls coming into the organisation? But this is all to do with channel shift and just seeing this downward trajectory, so that people are now finding other ways of contacting the council, i.e. online. Don't know if there are any questions on that one. Okay, online take-up, processes started online versus through the contact centre. Again, we've got a target ourselves of 80% and it's 80.8%. So gradually going up, although slowly. But I do believe that once we get the new website up and running, life will be so much easier for our residents and they'll be able to find their way around the new website better. And Chairman, that is it. Thank you.
Councillor Hopwood, can I thank you very much for that in-depth, knowledgeable report. Is there any questions or comments from councillors? No. Can I ask one of those silly questions? Would it be possible that when we have these next quarter, that we could have a comparison with the district councils in Devon, so that we have an idea of where we stand with the other councils?
Chairman, I don't really care about the other district councils in Devon. I'm sorry, and you as a group may have a different view, but I'm only interested in what South Hams, how we perform as an organisation. If we were performing poorly, then I may agree with you. But because we are not performing poorly, I would ask you to reconsider that and say, actually, do you know what? We don't need to compare ourselves to others because we're doing a damn good job ourselves. Sorry,
the only reason I question it is because we could then compare how good we are against Teignbridge or West Devon. Well, West Devon is us to a certain extent. But do members think we could do with that, or do they feel that it's not necessary? It's up to you. It's your committee. Stunned silence.
So I'd be inclined to agree with Councillor Hopwood that I think the whole point of having the national benchmarks or the targets that we've set ourselves, they're based on already looking across the field and setting that benchmark.
If the committee is happy with that, so I'm happy.
Can I add? I do think there's value in seeing what others are doing locally, because nationally there's going to be discrepancies in who can do what. So I would say yes to knowing what else is happening in Devon, and then we'll have more information as to whether we are doing a good job or not. So we've got things to.
Right, I'm going to go around the table then. We've got one. Councillor de Winter.
Yeah, I suppose the question is what then happens if we're performing much better. I mean,
then we know we're doing really well.
Does that create sort of a bit of could that create complacency? I mean, that would be my concern.
I hope not.
Or does it allow us to focus on the areas where we're not doing as well? I mean, I can see utility in looking at areas that are similar in structure to us, whether that's locally in Devon or other rural, more rural areas. I take Councillor Dommett's point that, comparing us nationally, we may be a little bit of an outlier on certain things just because the makeup of South Ham. So,
Councillor Hopwood.
Chairman, I would just say, if you want to look at another authority, look at another authority in your own time. But you've got to remember that everything every time you're asking for something to be done, it's taking up officer time, and that's my concern. How long it will take them to pull these stats together, and then actually what are you going to do with them? So it's about officer time, and I would suggest if you want it, look it up yourselves as members.
Okay, Councillor Dennis, I think I'm getting with not required.
My only interest is, and once again, it might be another Ricky question, are we comparing like with like? Because we set some of these KPIs ourselves, don't we? So will they have got exactly the same KPIs? Are we actually doing an exact, like for like or not? I don't know.
Councillor Lawford? Okay. No, I think I've got the idea of the room, to be perfectly honest. Neil?
Just to follow on from are we comparing like for like? I think that's an important point, because we can certainly give you the figures, but it's then understanding how they deliver those services behind the scenes, because we certainly know that I believe there's one similar sized council in Devon that might be performing much better than us, but they have a team twice the size of our team. And I think just giving you the figures wouldn't necessarily give you enough context to be able to compare. So I think the like for like is an important consideration in that. We would need to give you a lot more information to be able to understand that. We can certainly look at the figures, but it's then understanding how do they do it, and actually they might have different priorities than our council, and therefore, you know, put greater resource into some of those areas.
Nadine, did you want to come back?
Yeah, so if their numbers are easily accessible and then it highlights other councils that are doing way better than we are, that then gives us the impetus to look at what they're doing and how they're doing it better than us. So it's just a case of getting access to...
I think it's really going to look like it's going to be up to you and I to have a look ourselves, because there's not much support in the room. Yeah. So I think we've answered that question. Councillor Cooper.
Can I just suggest maybe the chair goes and looks and then sends it to us?
Can I suggest for the chair and the deputy chair do that? Yes, I think that's a very good suggestion. I said it was a silly question. Okay, Councillor Hopwood, thank you very much for that. Councillor Thomas, thank you for your assistance. Recommendations? Is everybody happy with those recommendations? All those in favour? Yeah, I think that's unanimous. Yep. Okay, thank you. Right, can we now go on to item 9, committee annual work programme? And while we've got Councillor Thomas here and Councillor Birch on executive, is there anything in particular that you would like us to be looking at in the months ahead? And Councillor Hopwood, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, can I suggest that you, as an ONS, have a look at the KPIs and more so to get a better understanding of how they're made up, not to scrutinise them again. So I don't, but if you have a look at them, maybe in a meeting, maybe informally with officers, then when you come to your next overview and scrutiny meeting, you'll have a better understanding of how they, because I know I've given you like an overview today, but if you have a really good explanation of how we even decide on those KPIs, and you get an explanation to each one, it may help you next time you come to scrutinise them for the next quarter. Could we perhaps do that in our working lunch before the next meeting? Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Oh, okay. Chairman, in all reality, I was hoping you would have an informal meeting rather than just have a quick natter over lunch. Okay, well, we will call in September, we'll call an informal meeting of this group to do exactly that. Thank you. Right, Councillor Birch.
In answer to your question about us two, are there any items that the executive wish your committee to consider or look into or develop? I think it's probably a little early for that, but I certainly would like to think that for those areas that I'm responsible for, and having discussed and after discussing it with the officers and fellow executive members, then I think in the next, hopefully the next 6 weeks, perhaps come forward with some items for you to consider at your next meeting, because I think one of the areas of policy development which Mr. Molyneux touched on at the beginning of the meeting is I think this is where your committee can play a really helpful part in developing or assisting or developing or helping in the development of council policy. So I certainly would hope that within the next 6 weeks we can perhaps come forward with some ideas that you can consider at your next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Thomas?
Well, I've mentioned enforcement, Chairman, but obviously that will have to go to exec first. Another hangover from the previous council, which you will find particularly interesting, Chairman, I have no doubt, is that you need to get Fusion back. Because we Mr. Mullin will confirm that we cancelled the April meeting when they were due to give new members the chance to meet them, but I would imagine that will be one that's high up on your priority list.
Thank you for that. Yes, it is. It's on my list, and that needs to come forward as soon as possible. Councillor, Mr. Morris.
So is it worth me just sort of going through sort of some of the partners that we've had in the past and sort of getting the view of the committee as to whether they'd like those partners to come back? So in the past we've had, as well as Fusion, Live West come along, and if you think about some of the issues that are certainly at large with our communities at the moment, in terms of the time taken from somebody being put in a property or being allocated a property to actually getting in, because there's a wait time on refurbishment, the disposals in terms of Live West disposing of lots of properties and not replenishing the stock, as well as general Live West performance. There's the Community Safety Partnership normally come along and do an update. We also have citizens' advice in terms of the services that they're providing to residents. They tend to come and present an annual report. We've got the CVS, the voluntary sector, Sustainable South Hams, all sort of groups that are key partners of ours. We unsuccessfully tried for a long time to try and get the South West Ambulance Service along. And if members wish it, in terms of their performance, we can look to do that as well. Indeed, yeah. So there's a range of, to give you an idea about sort of who can we get, what should we get. That was just to give you a flavour, really, in terms of, and I think we should be probably looking at maybe an internal item and an external partnership at probably every meeting, and that is probably enough. So that Councillor Hopwood will come back every quarter and present the KPIs. So there's one thing that's coming forward. We've then got potential. We've already just said that we wanted to look at homelessness and the review of what we're actually doing and what those statistics actually mean. So,
Mr. Molyneux, thank you very much for that. Yes, I think you must have been looking at my list before you printed yours off. Certainly with Fusion, yes, we need to bring them forward. They should have come forward, I think, in March at one stage, then April, and they keep on being delayed. So yes, I think that's really important, and I'm really keen on seeing how we can progress the investment in Totnes Leisure Centre, and how those debates are going forward with Tadpole. I think that's really important. CVS and citizen advice, yes, I think that is certainly one that needs to come. Live West, yes, Live West, and I think we've also, the previous meeting, I think we said Guinness Trust and other social housing providers that are in the South Hams. I think we should have perhaps even an afternoon session purely with them, so that we actually can get into their nitty gritty and actually delve into what they're actually doing in our communities, because sometimes it's not quite what we would all want. You've got there for Live West, yeah, the quality of the housing and quality of repairs and the speed of repairs to properties, their investment in our communities and how they're going to invest in our towns and villages and parishes, support to their residents in this particular time. Are they looking after our residents and selling the properties? That is a really big one, I think, is important. Sustainable South Hams, yeah, I think we'll all agree on that one. Two that I'm going to add, and then I'll pass over to Ben, which I've probably killed most of Ben's list, because Ben and I are pretty close on most of this. South West Water, we'd really like to bring them here. Quality of our bathing beaches, quality of our rivers and the water, and the sewage that's going into our rivers, or not, in their case.
When were they last here, or has there been a...
I don't think they've ever been.
Ben and I met them a couple of weeks ago in Dartmouth. Last week. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself. And and they did say they would come, because we took them to one side and said, we told you don't come, but we'd like you to come. So hopefully they will attend, and I think that's an important one. And then the other one that I've got on this list is NHS dentistry and the lack of dentist care in our South Hams and the area. Now, yes, we think it's sort of county and us, but maybe we could invite, and I'm looking at you as a county councillor as well, maybe we could invite the cabinet member for health to come to this meeting. Brain dead. Sorry, I can't remember either.
I know the director of public health is Steve Brown. So whether it's,
but I think that's really important about the lack of dentistry care in the South Hams and our communities. So yes, it's part Devon, it's part us, but and I was going to just say stagecoach and lack of bus services, but I'll pass over to Ben. You got any left?
No, you've stolen them all, so that's absolutely fine.
Is that all right? But I really think that's important, those issues. Do you all agree? No? Yeah? Steve?
So, I've got three others, actually, while we were thinking.
I've been told by my leader now. That's it.
So, AOMB, Dartmoor National Park, DCC in terms of state of the roads. They're all ones. So, bearing in mind, I've just calculated we've got 5 meetings and we've listed about 25 partners.
Yeah.
Can I suggest
we prioritise
that we pull a list together and we have a bit of a voting session on email of what we think are important to come
Everybody
up with
happy
a list?
with that?
Would that be an appropriate way forward?
And we'll do that in the next month.
Can I just ask a question of clarity here? So the point of this committee is to drive improvements in public services. So that's public services, whether they're in our control or not. Because do we have any power to do anything about dentistry or potholes or anything like that? So is that not just a waste of our time?
Yeah.
I'll let you answer.
I think.
Amelia. Oh, Steve. Sorry.
So I take your point. I think the council has a lobbying role, and in terms of, if you think of the council has successfully lobbied around the second homeowners and the cost of council services provided to those. So there is an element of understanding the issue, and is there something we should be doing, whether it's lobbying to our MPs or escalating the issue to get the executive or then the council to take that on. It's a valid point though. There's what can we do? But then at the same time, we are the champion of our residents, and we are their voice to try and hold people to account. Whether they will do anything other than it's one resident complaining about something, as opposed to South Hams District Council championing their cause, is perhaps a different way of looking at it. But I take your point. Is so we could get South West Water to come along and go, yeah, well, so what? We answer to our shareholders. But they need to, they're always going to answer to their shareholders. Who shouts loudest in some ways? You've got to be, make your case, I think.
I personally agree with Steve. We should be a champion for the residents of the South Hams as well as just inward looking. We should assist them as much as possible.
I've got a broad question, I think, which is the purpose of this committee and what our strategy is. If we've been asked to invite partners to speak or to discuss, then what are we seeking to achieve from that conversation? And if we have got a load of partners of whom we would like to speak to, we need to cherry pick those that meet or align to what it is we're trying to achieve. So it feels like, I'm sure that lots of people want to meet and have a discussion with, but who are going to be those that we will vote upon meeting to help further our wider ambitions, whether those are around areas that we're trying to scrutinise with the exec, or are there particularly pressuring points that we have from residents within the South Hams? I don't know, but it just feels like to me as if it would be helpful for us to be able to understand what those themes are. That informs partners. It also informs the work that we're trying to do here, does it not?
Chair,
Go on,
you. So I agree, and I think we need to give a little bit more information when we circulate the list. So, for example, We've talked about looking at the homelessness stuff, which then ultimately links to there's not the availability of housing. So therefore, by default, should Live West be one of the next ones that we look at because they are a key provider of social housing in our area. So having a bit of context around what we would want to achieve, I think if we put something a couple of lines beneath each one and then let members take a view, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think to some extent, for new people like me here, what's helpful is for those experienced councillors that can help suggest or perhaps guide to some extent in these discussions, so that we are more effective. I think ultimately. So where should we be looking, or who should we be talking to, and who should we be inviting to some extent will help. I think certainly in the early stages of meeting, discussing themes.
Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not telling you what to put on your work programme, but I am going to heavily suggest that Dartmoor National Park is a really good example of someone you should be having into your overridden scrutiny. There is a very small part of the South Hams in Dartmoor National Park that we tend to forget. And with the thing in the High Court at the moment with the sleeping on land on Dartmoor, right to roam, I think it's going to become more and more topical. So I would love to see you get Dartmoor National Park in. And I think you should firstly also concentrate on those organisations that we support in some way and give money to, CVS, CAB, SSH, AOMB, because they're the ones that are going to be asking for money when it comes to budget setting. So to have them in and scrutinise them and I would just prefer them to be further at the top of your list, because when you're coming to set your budget next year, then they're going to be the ones you're going to be thinking, can we still afford to support them to this extent? Well, if you've had a talk from them the month before, you might think, what the earth are we supporting them for? Or, oh yeah, well, I think their work's really good, so I would urge you to put those that we as a council support monetarily further up your list, just because of the budget setting process.
We've got a meeting on December the 21st. We could ask those bodies that we actually fund in a small way to actually come to that meeting, so that would feed into our budget process to see whether they are, dare I say, worthy to be continued or have increased money. Councillor Thomas, sorry.
I don't disagree with Councillor Hopwood, but I think it's really important, bearing in mind how we've discussed this committee as a critical friend, that we change the optics slightly there. I think what we should be saying is that we've agreed as a council to support these organisations, and therefore we should be bringing them into work with them so we can find out how we can benefit them further and how they can benefit us. I'm sure you didn't, Councillor Hopwood, but I just think it's important to make that point, that actually it's as much about the two-way relationship. Absolutely, we should scrutinise anyone who spends public money, as indeed we scrutinise ourselves. But I think it has to be very much, both sides of the same coin.
Nadine?
Is Business Information Point, or BIP, one of your partners, or someone that you funded to support new businesses?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Can we add them to the list, please?
Councillor Hopwood?
Do we still fund them? I thought we gave them £8,000 as a one-off fund and we don't do it anymore.
I'm looking at Councillor Birch to see if he knows, but I'm absolutely convinced that as part of the funding that we just got for government, the whatever it's called. Yeah, but I'm convinced that we actually do fund Business Information Point to help new businesses across South Hams. So I'm sure we do.
So that will be on the list. Councillor De Winter?
Yes, I was just going to say that if there's organisations that would help us to meet targets, for example, Stagecoach. I mean, if we're thinking about our sort of environmental targets and reducing traffic, etc., then I think it's completely reasonable to bring in an organisation like that who can help. We can work with to achieve those aims, even if they're not directly funded by the council.
Councillor Dennis, sorry.
I did ask officers for a list of all those organisations that we provide grant funding for or we're partners, but some of the ones we've talked about don't appear on that list. So is it possible to get a full list of the outside bodies and partners that we do fund?
Neil's got a long list.
Yeah. Neil gave me that list, but
Yeah,
some of the things mentioned
I
aren't
did
on
give you
that
that
list.
list, Councillor Dennis. I mean, at the moment, those sorts of arrangements are dispersed across a number of departments. We are looking at bringing all of that together, so we will have a more comprehensive list for you in the future. So I just focused that list on the particular areas you asked for. But yeah, we'll broaden that. And I think I'd also add that you've mentioned a number of partners here today. We can also request, a written report from them. So you might not have them in front of you, but we can ask them to provide us an annual report. So community transport schemes, we fund a couple of those. Now, we give them about £4,000 a year, so financially they're probably not going to be top of your list, but actually it's still really important that they can feed into you. So we will get those reports, and you'll see certainly through the member bulletin moving forwards, regular updates from me that have been sent in via key partners. So, even if they're not in front of you, we will still get updates from the majority of those key partners.
Councillor
Edie,
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually you might have just answered to some extent what I was thinking, and that is that. So, if there is a long list of partners that we would want to speak to, then we would need to narrow that down based on themes. I think, and when I say theme, I'm talking about whether it might be in the case of organisations that are to do with startups and funding, that is broadly down in the theme. We talked earlier about KPIs around business units, the council business units. Is it occupancy? I'm just trying to find it here. Estate occupancy rates. I just wonder whether, therefore, as a part of the strategy, it makes sense to have partners that come in that are speaking or at least discussing themes that we are particularly interested in, and we won't be able to have more than one partner, two partners. I know what session, so we're quite limited.
I think that's exactly what we're going to do. So the meeting where we discuss homelessness, we could bring Live West, Guinness Trust, other housing associations in, and we could bring that together. A December meeting on the 21st, that could be all the funders that we normally fund. The
budget related
so
matters.
that goes straight into the budget process. Fusion needs to sort of come, I would think, a lot sooner than that. Probably.
Are they a special case? I don't know.
Well, it hasn't been here for a very long time. So I think it needs to be here probably next meeting in October.
So does that help us shape sort of a body of work that we're setting out for ourselves to do for the coming year?
It certainly does.
Do we need to establish that pattern now, or is it just something which we'll underway?
We could do that via email, couldn't we?
So
we have a list.
We'll put together a draft programme. We'll get members' views on email, and then we'll present and agree it at the next meeting. But we'll make a suggestion for who comes to the next agenda, and then agree that on email. I think.
I think that sets our minds clear on what it is we're seeking to achieve in that particular session. Yeah. Okay, great.
Definitely, that's what we were going to do. Councillor Duwender.
Sorry, just spoke. So, just coming back to Fusion, because obviously they also are supposed to deliver services, for example, to GP practices. So, I mean, is there any scope to bring other partners in as well to that meeting? I mean, I don't know even if they because they may get funding from a health trust as well.
They do, and they normally cover that in their report in terms of their outreach and their outreach programme and what they're doing and where they've been funded from. So they do normally cover that when they come along. I think you'd struggle to get GP practices that would.
Well, no,
give
it would be
view.
the trust, wouldn't it? That would come. But I mean, it's just a thought that because they've got multiple I mean, we probably fund most of it, but they do have multiple arms, so it's.
I mean, in terms of the structure of the committee, there's nothing to stop you getting Fusion in or CVS in or Live West in, and then going, do you know what? That's not really answered all our questions. We'd like to do a task and finish group that looks specifically at these issues that we think have not been answered, and go away and then research and maybe then talk to other people to try and get the answers.
Yeah.
And then report back to say, that's what we got told there.
Yeah.
We've now looked at this and we're satisfied. Yeah, that's all
What we
right.
don't
Or
want to
actually,
do
there's a
is,
gap.
if we're presenting very firmly what we want from them, we don't want that to then disadvantage another stakeholder. You know, that would be my concern there, where they're trying to deliver to multiple.
Yeah. Councillor Hopwood.
I think you've got to be careful, Chairman, because especially with the likes of Fusion, there is a contract in place and they deliver to the contract. So if something that you're wanting isn't in the contract, well, quite frankly, you can't have it of them. So you've got to be a bit realistic. One, I would ask you to bring to the top of your list is the CVS, because they've got a new manager, and I would love to see that the CVS has improved and now wants the money we give them. So
I think, so I understand there was a new CVS manager coming in. The last one didn't last long, did it? About 18 months, something like that. And I would have thought that perhaps if they came, again, I would suggest a December meeting so that we actually gave her a little bit of time to bed in and to then actually put her case to the council for their funding. Because don't we fund them every 3 years?
yeah, it's not due to 24, 25 is the last funding period anyway.
Neil?
Update, Chairman. They are currently recruiting a new manager. So that person is unlikely to be in post by December. So they're out to recruit a new manager. But they have said that they want to work with the council to look at how we can work better together in the future. So it may well be a good
I thought at the previous meeting you said that they had already gone out and hopefully September. No?
They had, but they are out again.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So how have they actually? No. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna wind.
Can I just say one more thing? So you've talked a lot about pulling in people or organisations that the council fund, but what's been lost is the lobbying power and pulling in organisations that, although we don't fund, we might have some sort of power to, I don't know, influence or whatever. And I'm looking at the meetings that we've got, and it seems to be filled for the next year already. So I don't want to create more work, but is there a way, could we have a task force or another group that spins off this group that might pull in those other, sorry, I don't want to create more work, but realistically, you're not going to be able to do the things that you're thinking of doing, seeing all these people that you're thinking of seeing. We just don't have the time.
Let's see the list. Let's decide on what we feel as the priorities, and then we will work out the most priorities that perhaps have slipped. We perhaps set up a working group to look into them.
That's fine. All I would say is it's your extra work, not my extra work. So if you wanted to go and do that, that's absolutely fine. You can, there is limited officer support for the task and finish groups, other than if you particularly wanted to find out something, say about you did a task and finish group on homelessness, we could get the lead officer who looks after that to give you the detail. But in terms of, it's you can go off, you could decide that you want to go and do that, but you don't necessarily need us to do that.
Councillor Dennis, this is the last question.
Thank you for taking it then, Chair. I
wouldn't dare.
I just wondered if there's just a standard review process for these organisations that we're funding. I mean, why are we even talking about this if there's already a process where they have to submit a report, evidence certain things. We then just review that, and then if there's a problem with that, then we call them in.
They come to this overview scrutiny every year. I think sometimes they even go to the exec sometimes. But it is important that we actually understand that they're doing what we want them to do with our money to a certain extent. Neil, what comments do you have?
No, I'll just echo what you said.
We've got to work together with them.
So yeah, we do have, so for the majority of our key partners, Citizens Advice, CVS, as has been alluded to, we have a 3-year funding agreement at the moment, which has 2 years to run. But as you say, it's important that we do understand what they're doing, and actually any areas where we might want to work closer with them as part of the council. I think just to pick up on the previous point about policy development and those sorts of things, obviously we've recently implemented advisory groups as well to focus on some of our key areas, and I don't want to detract from the work of this group, but actually there is a forum there through the advisory groups to put forward suggestions in terms of lobbying activities around those key theme areas as well. So I think there's certainly another forum for some of that activity to take place without further spin-offs of this group.
And the one thing I would say about Citizens Advice, I work with them weekly up in Dartmouth, and what they actually do for our residents and our communities are amazing. You know, what they really do. Is there any other questions? No? Can I thank you all very much? I hope I've chaired this meeting reasonably well. I'll get told off by Councillor Hopwood later and Councillor Birch. But thank you very much, and wish you the rest of the evening. Have a nice time.